turned in the draft, which was good. You've all heard, or hopefully most of you heard, all of the interviews. You all know the due date, right? On the homework. Any questions? Well, I know there are some because I've gotten some by email or people talk to me. So let me answer a few questions that I know are out there, and then we'll see if that prompts any more. So here's one. Is my paper, I've written X number of pages. Is that enough? And I also heard, I've written Y number of pages. Is that too many? So I think that my assignment said 5 to 10 pages. Remember, I wrote the homework assignment before I knew anything about the Sabubi system except the name, right? The assignment was out on the web before any of the interviews started. So the 5 to 10 is my historical average of papers that have have captured all the detail that came out in discussion are usually in this length. But absolutely, some systems and some TAs and some students are such that a lot more stuff comes out, and in some a lot less stuff comes out. And I don't really know where this one is, but so the 5 to 10 is really to tell you, like, this isn't like a 1 to 2 page paper where a 1-paragraph summary would probably be function out. And this isn't the CLAW document, 120 pages or whatever that is. Okay, this is in the 5 to 10 page range. So we will not be scoring by counting up the number of pages or words, but we will be scoring by looking for specific things that are there. You know, I know that Chris spent a lot of time talking about fonts, so we want to write what font we want. So we're looking for all the detail on the fonts. Right? Everyone got the detail on the fonts? Okay. No. Did you ever talk about fonts? No fonts. Okay. Then don't say anything. You didn't seem certain enough. I missed that one. Question.
Is that how many pages? Is that an average for a single or double space?
Okay. So the question is 5 to 10 pages an average for a single or double space? So the 5 to 10 pages is an average for people who did what I requested with homework 1, which is they used the template Word document as their starting point for structure and all stylistic questions. So this is not, so do it like this. Single page, single. If you ask what font, do it like this. Margins, everything else. Okay, yeah.
Is it 5 to 10 pages in just the content, or including the first two?
Well, so the question is it 5 to 10 pages just with content, or including that scoring page, and the title page, and those 3 blank pages you put on the end? That's the beauty of 5 to 10 pages. Who cares, right? It's a broad range. I don't have to answer that question. And I really don't even have to answer the single space, double space. Do you feel like you have enough information? Do you feel like you're writing and you've got good things to say, and you're in the organizing and sort of presenting this in a way that makes sense and will capture what the customer said?
So with something that wasn't completely clear, is it better to say that this wasn't completely clear, or is it best to just omit it all together and ignore something that's a little kind of vague?
Okay, so the question is, if there's something that wasn't completely clear, is it better to say, this wasn't completely clear? Maybe not in exactly those words, but or just to ignore it. So I kind of talked about this last time. I think if it's something that's really minor, so hopefully you don't get yourself into that situation, right? Hopefully over 3 chances of interview and 240 people paying attention, that was part of your job. It was part of your responsibility, was to nail these things down. However, that never happens. It's always part of the interviewers, the software engineers, the requirements analyst's job to get all these things figured out, but it never ever happens. So it certainly doesn't happen in Max 43, it never happens in the real world. But that doesn't mean you can't try for it. So I would say if it's something that's really minor, like we never found out what font to use or something like that, then omit it. Because there will be all sorts of minor things that weren't important to the user, and that's why they didn't come up. If it's something that's fairly important, then I think you need to bring that up and say 2 or 3 or whatever different alternatives were suggested, and we weren't able to resolve whether to spell color C-L-O-R or C-O-L-O-U-R. That was unresolved, but discussed. English or American. And as I said, I think last week, in a more realistic situation, there would be some iteration. You would give your document to the requirements analyst, would give your document to the customer, and you say, okay, you'd highlight it, or in some way you'd say, okay, then here we talked about alternatives A and B, please initial which one you want, or that's an agenda item for the next discussion. But we don't have that luxury at the time, so we're not doing that. So I want to get back to the question of, do you feel like you've got enough information? I'm going to take that as a yes, or as a, I haven't really started digging in yet. Okay. So another question that a few people ask me is, you talked about what, not how? What? What's that? How's that? Okay. So we know we had the little exercise in class, so here's another way of looking at it, is you want to focus on what the customer needs, what the problem is, what the software will do for the customer, and not on how the programmer and the designers and the artists and whoever is doing the development, the user interface specialists, not how they will go about their job doing things. So, once again, this distinction is not totally clear-cut, but that's sort of the focus of it. Is the goal of the requirements document is what does the user require of this system to make the user happy and let the user do his or her job. So, for instance, if you say, we're going to use a MySQL database system, does the user care about that? Probably no. I mean, sometimes, of course, you get users who were formerly programmers, and they care about these things, or are currently programmers. So maybe the user doesn't, but certainly in our case, for Informax 43, spring 2013, the user doesn't care about technical things. So you won't put in, here's the database system, you won't put in, here are the classes, if you're an object-oriented programmer and you're thinking about classes, don't put those in. Don't put in algorithms, stuff like that. Okay, that's not appropriate for this document. Those are all important things. They will all have to be figured out eventually, but they're not part of this document. Question?
The other sections, I understand, but what about system requirements? Don't you answer how the developer implements the software with the components and functionalities?
Okay, I'm going to have to guess on what your question was. Tell me if I was wrong. I think you're saying it's hard to make this distinction in the section titled System Requirements.
Yeah, I mean, because I found...
Wait. Was that your question?
Sort of.
Okay, well then say it again, but say it louder. As if I'm 200 feet away from you.
I found myself doing that exact same thing in system requirements, but not in the rest of it. Like, in system requirements, I was explaining how to implement it, like what kind of functionality to do there, and how I'll have to design it.
Okay, so when I say how, I'm talking about how in a technical sense. So, but that's why the distinction between what and how is a little bit vague. So you could say the what is organize substitute teachers, right? And the how is we're going to have a system that's going to have a list of substitute teachers and it's going to select them, and it's going to rank them, and it's going to call them, and whatever else, right? Well, now all of a sudden that's how. I would still call that what. So the what versus how is absolutely a continuum. And at the one end, the what is end is the real big goals of what are we trying to do with this system, which, you know, what are the problems we're trying to solve. And then at the other most how-y end is we have these programs written in these databases and these algorithms and this source code. And what we want to do is somehow stay over on this side. So you're definitely going to have to break the big goals of the system, like organizing substitute teachers, into some pieces that will lead to that. And you could say that's how. That's a how thing. But it's still on the what side. It's still what the customer needs in the software. So if part of the system is the system will schedule private helicopters to fly over to the house of the substitute teacher and bring them to the right school, is that part of the system? You're not sure? You're not sure? I don't think that's part of the system. But suppose it were. I need to select examples which are not really in the system because I don't want to mess you up. Don't let that get into your requirements document, okay? There's nothing about helicopters. But suppose that was the requirement, was that what we wanted to do with the system was is schedule helicopter pilots to come pick up substitutes teachers and take them to remote schools. So you could say, well, that's how it gets done. That's how the teachers get to the schools. All right, that's true. But still, we're still talking about functionality that is very visible to the user, and that if the system does that, the user sees it, and if the system doesn't do it, the user sees that. But if we say, oh, by the way, the helicopter scheduling code will have to be written in PHP, which is a programming language, the user doesn't care about that. The user will not see that. So that's definitely in the how end. That's too far in the how end of things to go into the requirements document. Does that help? Okay, so those are my questions that I know some of you have asked, but there are more. No?
So how far in depth should we go with the, I think it's called the system requirements section, the part that we're writing for the developers?
How far in depth should you go in the system requirements section, system requirements specification section, which is oriented towards the developers? Client can actually absolutely read it, right? But it's oriented towards the developers. How much depth would you go? I would say put down everything you know. Everything that, you know, you've got to sort of imagine that your programmers will not have access to the client. So everything that you extracted out of the client's brain in your requirements elicitation interviews, you should be writing down. Because the programmers will not be able to call up the client and say, hey, what kind of helicopter do you want? That should all be there. Of course, we'll get to the fact that not everything things will come up that we're not asked about or thought about. But as much as you know, don't omit something because you don't have, it seems like it's too detailed. As long as it's things that the customer said. What do you do if you have a really good idea for how the system, you know, some new functionality for the system that never came up, but it's just such a great idea, you know the client will like it. Where does that go? No? Future was one thought. No? That doesn't go in this document. Your ideas that never came up in interviews don't go into this document, okay? Don't make up stuff. That's not the goal of any part of this document in terms of functionality and ideas like that. All right, well, if you do have more questions, let me know.